So when was signing up for a class, I was looking on the board out there and it said, "Should character count?" I thought, well, that'd be a good one. I'll sign it. And then I looked through the book and I looked and looked and looked. And it's like, it's not in here. So did they write the wrong title down? But I realized later that it was a little different. So didn't expect the headline that I read when I signed up. I mean, but I don't regret that at all. But I think it's been a good study for me. I think it all boils down to, yes, character does count. And I will not read the article, but I hope all of you have done such. I actually kind of experienced something like this when I was in high school. I don't remember if I was still in junior high or maybe a freshman or so, because the guy was several years ahead of me. But he was a senior, just like this story, and I don't think he was valedictorian, but he was a very good student, athletic, and known to a lot of people, really outgoing. I didn't know him personally, but he didn't commit a crime. Well, yeah, he did. Him and the boys went out and got drunk one night, and he was sitting on the tailgate of a truck, and the guy drove off, and he fell off the back and was killed. But what upset me was that even the school in town of Plainfield named one of those strip pits out there after him when they started building houses around it, and they had a scholarship for him and all this stuff, made him out to be this great person, which in my eyes he wasn't. But that's kind of, when I read this, I thought of that, and I thought, wow, how close that is. But really, I want to kind of go through some of these questions just real quick, and then get on to some other thoughts. But what is your definition of character? Or perhaps maybe another word for character? Anybody? David?
I think just off the top of my head, I would say character is your moral makeup.
Okay.
And we know that the scriptures help us mold that character because we can see the examples in the scriptures and the scriptures that tell us how to behave and how to act and so on and so forth. So our character before we're Christians is probably different than our character after we're Christians. I think we continue to finally hone our character throughout our life. But I would say it's our moral makeup, it's our standards, it's our values, it's what we stand for. If I give my word to you, you can count on my word. You know that I'm a man of my word. Or if I say I'm going to do something, you know it's going to be taken care of, or those kind of things. I think that's an example of character traits.
Right, moral, and I put down mental as well. Qualities distinctive to an individual. Now, on the other side of it, what is the Bible's definition of character? Bob kind of touched on it too. Before we were Christians and after, our character should be different. I think that character is who we are because of our relationship with Christ. If we are to become a Christian, we're going to have a certain character in our lives, and that is something built and learned as we follow Him. Any other thoughts on biblical definition of character? I also wrote down genuine Christian character is not just about our personality or our disposition. It is a description of who we are as Christians and what we are called to be to be in our entirety. So there's, I mean, you know, the study that we're doing on Sunday morning of different characters, we see the different individuality out of each one of them. We see the good and the bad and all. Does someone give me a kind of a gist of this article, what's going on here? It's almost, you know, word for word to me from my experience from when I was in high school. But who is Cameron Martin? He's the high school boy that right, he was, and he pled guilty. That's one thing to me that stuck out. He didn't try to fight it or run to mom and dad, but he admitted it. So what's that tell you about his character? You find out that he pled guilty to stealing. You know, he's a honor class or honor roll or whatever it's called, honor society, valedictorian, you know, football star, but here he is a thief. So what does that tell you about his character?
Well, obviously, to a degree, he's a fraud. He's putting on a front, but underneath, he has, if we're talking about character, serious character flaws. He wants to look to the public or to the world like he's an upstanding, fine young man, and so on and so forth. But in reality, he thinks he's above the law. He can steal or he can do whatever he wants if he can get away with it. And that shows a very drastic character flaw if we're talking about character.
Right. Okay. Any others? You know, and even though, and this kind of rolls over to the principal here, but even though he was a good student and such, his behavior showed through. What about the principal? I agree with the principal. I think the quote of the article that I like the best is so true, and I wholeheartedly agree. Principal Taylor says it's about character. Mr. Martin has demonstrated that his character needs some work. We hope that this punishment by the school will reinforce that there are consequences to one's actions and that he will be deterred from such actions in the future. I totally agree with that. I think what his parents tried to say, well, that school is different and life is separate, but I don't believe so. I mean, your character shows out throughout all parts of your life. So what you think of the behavior of the principal, Taylor? You agree, disagree? Juanita?
No, I agree, because for the future, as it said, maybe somebody has to remember this happened,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not gonna put up with me doing that. The way he's making an example of this practice also
Yeah.
prevent other students from trying to do the same thing.
Right. Well, that's the way I felt too with the kid at Plainfield, that, you know, the scholarship and award and naming the housing addition and lake after him, you know, that's all it's going to do is tell kids that, hey, it's okay to do those things. And from what I remember too, the parents kind of allowed it. They said, well, we'd rather have the kids come here and take all their keys away and we'll provide a safe place, but they decided to go somewhere else, and there he jumped in the back of the truck and they took off, and he was killed. But so right, Juanita, you got to set the example, and that's going to follow him for a long time. What about his father, Brian Martin? Don't you think he overreacted? I think son's behavior was bad, and he should pay the consequences, but he felt otherwise, right?
Say his parents didn't act very responsible. They kind of glazed over, it seemed like, what he had done, and not realizing how serious it was and the example. And so they didn't really, to me, set a good example for him or the community or the school.
Right. And I think, what did it say? One of the parents said that, this was a private matter, with our son. No, when you do something like that, it's not. And I've seen that before. Parents try to stand up for their kids when they've done something wrong. David?
I find the private matter argument interesting, especially in our current day and time. And I've been at several different schools that have had multiple incidents of students doing really dumb things on social media, and that argument always comes up. Well, this didn't happen at school, blah, 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 blah. And the answer from every administrator I've been around that's had to deal with it has been, once it affects the school in any way, it is the school's business. And so that's just the way that our world today is set up, whether people like it or not. And so even beyond something this severe, there can be a lot of smaller things now that our kids can do that will get them in a lot of trouble at school, even though it didn't happen there.
Right. And Megan, go ahead.
And to go along with what David said, when you apply to be in the National Honor Society, they ask you all different questions. They want to know your volunteer. They don't want to just know your GPA. They don't want to just know how you are at school. They want you to be a well-representative, like a leader in the community. So it is not just about the school.
Right. And I think Todd mentioned last week when we were talking about the internet, those things that you say on the social media, that goes everywhere, and that shows your character, and that doesn't go away.
Personal experience about what she just said. My granddaughter was a straight A student, and I kept wondering, why isn't she in the Honor Society? And it just went on, and I even contacted a teacher that I knew. And then my son said, Mom, she's not a joiner. She spent her time studying, and it has paid off because she has a major job with a major company. And so it just proved to me you didn't have to. It was more than grades that made the Honor Society.
Right. Thank you. So then,
I want to go back to him, because it sounds to me, and obviously we just have a little snippet of what he said, but it sounds to me he's making excuses for his son.
Right.
He doesn't want him not to be the valedictorian. He doesn't want his GPA affected. He doesn't want this, he doesn't want that, because it's probably going to affect scholarships and after high school and so on and so forth. But the point that I think the dad's missing is this is a time for him to also teach his son that there are consequences to your behavior.
right.
And our actions have consequences. And if we don't face consequences, we're going to continue to make stupid judgments like this kid did. We're going to continue to do these things. But if it was nipped in the bud at this point, I don't know a better way to say it, but if it was dealt with at this point, our actions should have consequences. Being stupid should be expensive, okay? It should. If he went and he stole things and just because he could, he's going to have to pay for it. And to just say, oh, just forget it, that was out of, that was over here, that doesn't, like you said, they're going to hold that kid up as, this is the cream of the crop of our high school. this is what we should all emulate, and it's been referred to over here. And that's not the kid you want to emulate.
Right.
That's the character you don't want to emulate. So I think the father in this case was really missing an opportunity to raise his son and to correct a situation now before it got worse.
All right, and then the behavior of the students walking out. What do you think, Gene?
I think another very important point, there was 2 classmates with him.
Yeah.
And I would say that was the 3, and I'd say there's more than 3 were aware of what was going on. So it has a bad influence on the whole class.
Well, yeah, and like me, you know, I didn't do anything about it, but I was upset about, you know, what they were doing with this kid at school. I don't even remember his name now, but, you know, I was old enough that I knew right and wrong, and knew that was wrong, and I didn't care for what was being done. But yeah, the other boys with him or whoever. But then the students, you know, that kind of irks me too, that they walked out because they felt like what they were doing to them was wrong. But, you know, I don't know what they were thinking, you know, hey, I lost my ability to get some cheap, you know, hot goods, you know, or something maybe. But, yes, sir.
Looked up the National Honor Society. It says membership in the local chapter is an honor bestowed upon a student. Selection for membership is by a faculty council, is based on outstanding scholarship, character, leadership, and service. Once selected, members have the responsibility to continue to demonstrate these qualities. So that right there is exclusion from the Honor Society. But I know too, you know, usually, I believe in most cases, there are several students with a 4.0 GPA in high school, and then they start looking at outside curricular activities. So if his parents would have wanted them to look at these outside curricular activities to promote him to valedictorian, it's a two-edged sword. It can also detract him from being valedictorian too.
So, right, and I think his success was overruled by his behavior, of course. Any other thoughts on the students? All right. So let's evaluate the argument of Principal Taylor. We've kind of already talked about this. Consider more than just their grades. Should their character be considered? I totally agree that it should. So what does it say about our society when we honor those who have not behaved honorably? Do you see that in the world? Of course we do. You know, my example of at Plainfield High School, we should be watching what we do. You know, I see going through the stores or something, I see these little kids cussing, and then you hear the parents cuss, and then you understand where they got it. And all 4 of my kids, you know, they watch me do stuff, and you know, Wyatt especially, I catch him all the time. It's like Crystal's always saying, Wyatt, you're just like your dad. Or Grandpa, you know, kind of likes to pester the girls. So it's important how we act, what our character is.
Ask about what society, what does it say about our society? I mean, it says our society doesn't care about a person's character. It says that they trust someone even though, and it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. David?
I see a strong parallel between this and the ends justify the means argument that is pervasive. Honestly, every time I hear someone talk about it, the phrase is characterized as, oh, no, absolutely not. The ends don't justify the means. But in everyone's actions in the world around us say exactly the opposite, that if we are getting something out of whatever the situation is that benefits me personally, then I'm good with it. I don't care what you did to get there or to give me the thing that I desire, but that's the place we're at. And I mean, the Bible can't be further from that. It can't be. It's as far from it as possible that the character and the works that we do will produce a certain result, but we're not the result at all costs. The action, the journey is what's really important here.
Good point. So number 3, we started with the students, but do you think they had a right to walk out? Anybody say yes? No, I don't believe so at all. That was showing poor character, of course, there too. Again, a quote from the principal. What was it he said again? It's about character. Mr. Martin has demonstrated that his character needs some work. And I'd go on to say it needs more than some work. It needs a lot of work. Okay, so it says here, after giving your answer above, read these verses and see if your answer changes. I don't think anybody's answer changed, but I do want to read those verses. Someone read Romans 13, 1 through 7 for me. David? Romans 13, 1 through 7.
Everyone must submit to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are instituted by God. So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have its approval. For government is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword for no reason. For government is God's servant, an avenger that brings wrath on the ones who do wrong. Therefore, you must submit, not only because of wrath, but because of your conscience. And for this reason, you pay taxes, since the authorities are God's public servants, continually attending to these tasks. Pay your obligations to everyone, taxes to those you owe taxes, tolls to those you owe tolls, respect to those you owe respect, and honor to those you owe honor.
Amen, right? Right, all right in there, telling those being subject to government. Even Jesus talked about that. They asked him about taxes, and he says, whose image is on there, that coin? And they said Caesar's. And he said, render to Caesar's what is Caesar's, to God what is God's. So again, that just nails in the point that our character counts in everything. Sean, will you read Titus 3, 1 and 2?
Remind them to be subject to the rulers and authorities, to obey, to be ready for every good work, to speak evil of no one, to be peaceable, gentle, showing all humility to all men.
Right. And then, Todd, you want to read 1 Peter 2, verses 13 through 17?
To every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to governors as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. As free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God, honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king.
Okay, so again, we think of some of the main words there in all those passages: respect, honor, things along that line. So did anybody's opinion change after they read those verses? Nope, mine either. Okay, so last question here. Had you been Cameron's friend, what would you say to him? Or what would you have done? How would you have handled the situation?
If I was his friend and I knew he was doing it beforehand, I would try to explain to him to look at what he's potentially throwing away. I mean, you look at, the kid's got everything going for him, apparently. Football, honor society, he's a good student, presumably well-liked, so on and so forth. But he's going to throw all that away for $8,000 worth of stereo equipment or whatever it was, and possibly ruin his life. Like I said before, one of the things that might happen to him is he might lose a scholarship that he would have had, possibly couldn't go to the school he wanted to go to, get the education he wanted to go to, which affected his career choices, and so on and so forth, for this, what some people would call indiscretion. That was the other thing I was going to mention. Unfortunately, our society often puts these folks like this in a victim status. And I think that's what the other students were doing here. They were saying, oh, well, this is too severe on just for this small little infraction. He just made a little tiny mistake, and you're going to jump down his throat and do all these things. That's nothing but making excuses for bad behavior. And you see it all the time in society, unfortunately. I see it in friends of mine, the way they're dealing with their kids or their grandkids or whatever. And I go back to the father. I think it's a tremendous mistake that was being made with this young man. So as a friend, if I knew beforehand, I would try to talk him out of it.
Right. Right, exactly. Unfortunately, he appears he had friends that didn't think that way and probably encouraged him. All right, as far as a parent, had you been his parent, what would you have done? I think he would have got more than 6 months probation. But I think he should have. But yeah, right. Yeah, and I see the principal as good character in all of this. I don't know. I kept thinking, you do the crime, you're going to do the time. That thought went through me the whole time. So, and I'm thinking about character. When you give me a name and I sit and I try to think, the character, I think we see that comes out very quickly. I think whatever is first in their lives is what they're all about. Character does count. We should always be watching what we do, what we say. Again, like Bob said, your moral qualities. I thought about your mental qualities, and we need to think about spiritual qualities. David?
Rita just texted me. She's watching on Zoom. She said, I can think of 2 times I tried to talk to a parent who is a Christian about something I've seen at school about their child that concerns me. Neither time went well at all. We need to be our kids' advocate, but not to the point that we defend bad or sinful behavior.
Right. And, again, you ever met anyone that you thought, that person's obnoxious or, worldly person, and then come to find out they're a member, supposedly they're a Christian. You wouldn't know it by their behavior. Their character wasn't very good.
I think the most important thing for, the kids, the small ones or whatnot, is for them to learn respect for the parents. That's the beginning right there, I feel like. In
Right.
other words, I remember first time I went out, with a cousin of myself, with my mother. She was scared to death of water. She said, "Gene, don't get any water." And so, I didn't, but I didn't want to go back home. And my mother asked me if I did, because then I felt like she didn't trust me. But she did not. So, but respect, that's, at what age do they learn that?
Yeah.
2, 3? I don't know.
Yeah, we need to teach them as soon as possible. I totally agree with you. Julian?
I'd just like to tack on David's comment. It rang a thought in my mind back when Jason was in high school. I don't remember what he had done, but he had to stay after school, and this, I think it was a math teacher's class. Well, it worked out that neither Lydia or I could pick him up after class at that time, and called the principal and asked. He said, "Well, you'll have to call and talk to the teacher." Well, I could tell immediately that teacher was expecting a difficult conversation, but I told her that I apologized for my son and what he had done, but that I expected him not to be a problem in her class. If he was, she could call me and let me know. As a matter of fact, if she wanted to set him right in front of her desk, be fine with me. And I mean, you could hear her falling over, as I said that. And then when Jason, when I got him home, told him the same thing. Never had to do that again.
Yeah.
So, it's back to, some things that Bob has said, as how you teach your child and to be respectful and so forth.
Kendrick's got a comment.
We talk about character. It's not very often we're asked about somebody's character. Usually the question is, what kind of guy is he? Or, what kind of person are they? And you can answer that question usually pretty quickly. But when you ask about the character of a person, that's a lot deeper, kind of in my opinion, because the character is a culmination of things, right? Of words, of deeds, action. A lot of things kind of over time. It's really hard to stick a pin in a character and really pin that character on that individual unless you really know them, because people make mistakes. No one's perfect. We're all going to mess up. Our kids are going to mess up. It doesn't matter how hard you whip them with a rod or if you just throw the rod away when they're born. You have to be consistent, because that consistency helps build that long-term character. And I think that's important to kind of keep in mind too. So that way we're not necessarily judging people and saying their character is this off of 1 or 2 actions, because what did they do with that? What did they do when they messed up? What did they do when there was a mistake made? Or when, that is when you find the true character of a person.
Right. Right, see how they act, deal with it. Todd? I didn't see you first.
Obviously, character is the, center point of the subject, but, I think we all know people with the utmost character that have made mistakes, and your character also can show, on how you handle your mistake, and, Lynn and I know a young man that, he planned on making a career out of the Navy. When he graduated, he had already gone through all the, necessary things of signing up and all. Last day of school, he steals a stop sign, and just to impress a girl, but he got caught and the Navy wouldn't take him. But he bounced back real well, he got some additional schooling, got a good job, and, and he's never had any trouble since. But that's where I'm going with this. Character can be before and after the situation. How do you handle your fall?
Right. Good point.
Talk about character, it made me think, when I did the lesson on deacons, I know this isn't talking about deacons in Acts 6, but it's also one of the guidelines that I asked the members here to look at as they suggested individuals to be considered for deacon, and it's Acts 6, verse 3. The apostles told the brethren at this time, "Wherefore, brethren, look ye out among ye 7 men of honest rapport, full of the Holy Ghost and wisdom, who we may appoint over this business." And we ultimately appointed 3 men, one of them holding the microphone here, and they were put forth by this congregation expressing their confidence in these young men because of who they are and how they maintain themselves and how they exude that character, and Derek and Ryan and Sean and the other men that are deacons obviously demonstrated that character. And so character is important, and people notice it, because if people didn't notice it, how would they know who to put forward?
Right. All right, some other thoughts I had here. So character is critical. Who is your guidance? Now, Gene mentioned, starting with your children very young, with teaching them respect and such. How do we build our character? No doubt in study of the Word of God, of course, but how do we, we see this guy, and he had 2 other buddies that were involved in it too. So he definitely did not have good counsel or good guidance. For me, well, first of all, let's read, someone read Proverbs 27, verse 17, very short verse. We probably could quote it almost. It's one we read many times. Anybody, just go ahead and read it.
Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another.
All right, anybody ever sharpen a knife? Do you ever, they got these things now where they're just like a couple blades and very easy. But do you ever, I remember my grandpa getting his pocket knife out and using a whetstone. He had used it so much there was almost a concave in that stone. And one time, a friend gave me it was a switchblade that he got over in Vietnam or something when he was over there, and he gave it to me, but it was duller than a butter knife. I mean, it just had no edge to it at all. And he gave me this little whetstone, and I worked and got that a really good sharp blade on it. So the people that surround us, that help us out, I think of my wife. She's number one on my list of group that helps me build my character. So who do you guys have, where else do you look at to find someone that iron sharpening relationship? Where else do we get those? We get that. Work? Do you have many people at work that you have that good iron sharpening relationship with? For me, my history of work history, not really. Again, I said my wife, I look to you people. This congregation is number one. We have elders that I can go to any time to talk to. All the deacons, they've always been helpful to me. So we need to carefully consider those who surround us daily. Wrong way. Wise counsel strengthens character. God wants us to connect with Him. Todd, you want to read Psalm 1:1 for me?
Psalm 1:1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful.
Okay, so we're not going to, it says, blessed is the man that does not walk in, and lives not in the counsel of the ungodly. So we're not going to follow their advice, right? We're not going to listen to their plans. We're not going to follow their purposes. And it says, nor stands. We're not going to be submissive and inactive. We need to stand up and take part in showing where that wrong character is. I think we need to pray for us to be surrounded by those iron sharpening relationships. Take advantage of those things. Don't sit back and just hope somebody will step up. And sometimes it takes an outreach. But in my experience too, I've had people come to me and say, hey, what's going on? Let's get you fixed, But also, don't be scared to step up and talk to people. Get that iron sharpening relationships going with you. And we need to focus on areas that we need development. I think Todd mentioned, character before and after the action. We need to see those things and focus on those things and develop them. Stay diligent. Proverbs 22, verse 29. Do you see a man diligent and skillful in his business? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. Do you ever seen anybody that has a business or anything that just kind of, maybe gets up at 10 and works till 2 or something, do any good? We got to be diligent. We got to, get up early and start and work on our character. Worked on diligence coupled with godly character is critical. We need to pray for God sent iron sharpening men to help us. And again, those are there, and we need to find them and use them. And I just wanted you to think about what areas has God called you to focus on. So just think about where your character lies and what it is, and strive to be godly. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? All right. Well, I thank you for your attention and appreciate your comments. Thank you for reading.